Hi, creative friends. This is Soraya, and thank you so much for being here. So, today we're going to talk about unconscious agreements. What are they? How we can spot them, and why we should even bother to do this work. Okay, so it's going to be a lot. I don't have any notes. I'm just totally talking to you very casually, and I want this to come from the heart, and I want to explain this in as simple a way as possible. So, we're going to talk about Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And in my last video, I talked about the fairy tale, folk tale of Bluebeard, how Bluebeard shows us what the journey of consciousness, what it is, what the unconscious self represents, what the conscious self represents. It talked about boundaries, about the masculine aspects. It talked about a lot of different realms within Jungian psychology. So I brought up a concept in my last video where I talked about unconscious agreements, and this deserves a video all on its own. And you guys, this is a life changer. It was for me. So I didn't even know that I had these unconscious agreements. I had no idea. And that's why they're called unconscious agreements. They are part of our shadow selves, and they are so insidious that they are buried so deep in the unconscious that once we turn the light on, like Bluebeard's wife did, figuratively speaking, when she opened the door and she saw what was in that hidden room, that is the metaphor of us turning the light on and looking at the unconscious and seeing what is really going on. Your whole life is going to change. You're going to have a tower moment. When I talked about tarot cards, and the tower is where the false reality that we have created, it all comes crashing down. So, anyways, before I get ahead of myself, let me talk about unconscious agreements. What are they? So, I talked a lot about beliefs and belief systems, which I likened to programming. So, just say that we are computers and we get downloaded with all these programming belief systems when we are children, usually by our family of origin, but also by our larger society, culture, religion, all these institutions, education, etc., etc. So what unconscious agreements are they are shared beliefs. So whereas our beliefs are like right here, the crown chakra, okay, shared beliefs are we are sharing our crown chakra with somebody else or a group of people or an institution. And I'll give you examples of this. So just say that I am, and I'm going to use I'm going to use very kind of extreme examples just to make my point. Okay, so just say that I am married and I have a shared belief, an unconscious agreement with my spouse. I am a woman, my spouse is a man. I have an unconscious agreement that the man makes all the rules, he is in power, he is in control, I will never make more money than him, etc., etc., etc. This is a very common unconscious agreement that happens in marriages in patriarchal societies. Now, I'm not saying that every single marriage that occurs within a patriarchal system has these unconscious agreements, but this is a pattern. This is a very common. This is common across cultures, etc., etc. So just say now I have an unconscious agreement with a group of people. So I'm going to use, say, a family, whether it's my family of origin, whether it's, I got married and it's my in-laws, etc. So just say I have an unconscious agreement with with a group of people. They happen to be, a family, my family. I have an unconscious agreement that I am never going to argue with somebody who is my elder. So just say I have a mother-in-law who is, really treating me poorly, really disrespectful, crossing all boundaries, violating boundaries, etc., etc., etc. But I have an unconscious agreement. So they believe in this as well. And we are sharing this belief unconsciously that no matter what they do, I will not stand up to them. Okay. So that is an example of an unconscious agreement I might have with a group of people, because it's not just my mother-in-law, it's anybody who is in that position. So it could be my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, maybe my husband's elder brother, etc., etc. So um, you know, this happens, this is a very common theme in Indian families, and I'm sure it is for a lot of patriarchal cultures. The woman, once she gets married, she has to listen to her in laws. And not only does she have to listen to her in laws, but she has to listen to, say, her brothers, all of her, say, her brother in laws. Perhaps she has to listen to all of her sister in laws. And maybe if she has a son, she might have to listen to her son. This is a very common theme in Indian families. You have these unconscious agreements. So now just say I have an unconscious agreement with an institution. That institution could be marriage, it could be religion. And a lot of times, like, institutions will work hand in hand with each other. So just say I am married and I have an unconscious agreement with the whole institution of marriage that says that I will never get divorced. Um, because, till death do us part. It has been ordained by, you know, my religion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so no matter what occurs in that marriage, I mean, I could be abused, I could be very unhappy. My husband and I could not want the same things out of life anymore. We could not even like each other, but it doesn't matter because I have this unconscious agreement with with an institution that says that, I cannot get divorced. Like, there is no other alternative. You don't even think about it. It's just an unconscious agreement. So you can see how insidious this can become. And it's terrifying when you really think about it, because your crown chakra, like, so your beliefs, you should have sovereignty over all of your chakras. You should not be sharing your chakras with anybody unconsciously. So when you have these unconscious agreements, you are allowing an entity that is outside of yourself to have sovereignty over your energy points, your chakras, and vice versa, because if you have a shared agreement, then it goes both ways, right? And I'll use the example of, maybe I get married and I have an unconscious agreement with my husband that because he's the male, he has to be the breadwinner. And in a patriarchal system, that is a very common thing. And maybe that, maybe my husband has this unconscious agreement because it's between, like, say, both people. So that works to his disadvantage as well. So patriarchy, like I have mentioned before, it doesn't work for anybody. Not really. It might in the short term, but it really doesn't help us fulfill our potential as human beings, you know in a non-gendered way. So what I am going to talk about here is, when we have unconscious agreements, this could include a lot of things like codependency, addictions, um, scapegoating, abuse. It can really fuel all of those things, because when we have these unconscious agreements, we are not acting in a conscious way. So most likely, those agreements are not going to be for our highest good, for our empowerment. They are there to keep us stuck. Um, and this is not to lay blame on anything external to ourselves. It is our job to become conscious of those unconscious agreements. And how do we recognize these unconscious agreements? Well, we have to become like detectives, because these unconscious agreements can be so well hidden. Now they're unconscious, so we don't know them. And um, it's like we really have to become detectives. So the number one thing we have to do is we have to look for patterns. So this is not a one-time thing, or a, um, something that happens infrequently. These are patterns, patterns of behavior, patterns of being, patterns of the way we show up in the world. We have to look for patterns. The second thing that's going to give us a lot of information are our triggers. When we are acting unconsciously from our very wounded selves, we are very easily triggered. I remember in my 20s and 30s, it is so painful for me to look back on those times at how wounded I was, because I was so triggered. I could just go like that. And it put me in positions where I was always giving my power away. I was always playing the victim. I was so disempowered, um, that it is very painful for me to look back at those past versions of myself. So, our triggers, when we have an emotion and we have a reaction, we have a space between those two. And if we can expand that space, our triggers can give us a lot of information, because they're going to show us, they're going to show us our fears, our woundedness, our unconscious selves. They are a treasure trove of information. And this is where meditation, detachment, all of those things come in handy. If we can take an aerial view of things, if we can become very objective about things, so looking at things in a very almost as if we're like not even in our bodies. And I don't mean that in a um, I don't mean detachment in a sense of denial and cutting off parts of ourselves. I mean detachment in a sense of just pulling all of our power inside of ourselves, observing and saying, hmm, let me see what this trigger can show me. Becoming very curious about all the information. It's such a wealth of information it can give to us. So that takes a lot of practice, I have to tell you. So, because, it's all very well and good to be sitting here and talking about these things and then reading and journaling and going for a walk and meditating and all of those things. But when you're really in that moment, it takes a lot to get into that space between the trigger, the emotion, and the reaction, and trying to expand that space. So our triggers can give us so much information. Um, Another thing is our emotions. Our emotions are another huge, huge bounty of information. Am I feeling stuck? Now, these are patterns again, repetitive. Am I stuck? Am I always depressed? Am I always crying? Am I always, talking down to myself? Am I always angry? All of these are emotions, and they're giving us information. So we become curious about our emotions. We hold space for our emotions. We get to know our emotions. We become intimate with it. We create safe spaces within ourselves. These are going to give us lots of clues about what our unconscious agreements are. Because, like, just say I'm in a relationship, for instance, a friendship. I'll use that as an example. And every time I'm around this person, I'm just always, feeling really angry and resentful. Well, that's going to give me a wealth of knowledge about, you know, my those emotions are going to give me so much information about, well, do I have unconscious agreements with this person? Do I have shared beliefs with this person that are disempowering me? So we become like detectives in our lives, really. Another thing um, that's going to give us information is we look at a language, the language that we use and the language that other people use with us. Words are important, they mean things. Language gives us so much information. And again, we look for patterns. Is it repetitive the way I'm, talking about myself? Like in the example that I gave about um I'm sorry, I don't remember the example that I gave about the um when we okay, so just say that I have a shared belief with an institution that I am always supposed to stay in my marriage no matter what. Well, I look at the language that I use. So just say I'm in my marriage and I'm very unhappy all the time. I'm angry all the time. Well, I have to look at the language that I use not only with myself, but the language um that I share with my partner. Those are all going to give us a lot of clues. Now, the last tool that I have that we can look at our unconscious agreements is we have to look at our family dynamics. This is so, so important because we were programmed, by our family of origin. And on the outer edge of that, of course, we are going to be programmed by our society, by our culture, by religion, by education systems, etc., etc. But by and large, our family of origin is going to do the majority of the programming, whoever our main caregiver was. And so we have to become, again, very detached and to look at it almost as if it's not us. Like look at it in a very um like you take the aerial view of things. You look at it like it's not like it's a story. It's not even you. And that way you can look for clues. You can see, okay, you draw a family tree of, well, this person, I know this person was an alcoholic, and I remember, my grandmother saying XYZ. And so you look for these clues and these patterns and these repetitive things that, keep on showing up not only in our lives but in our family trees. So those are some ways that we can look and see and become detectives in our own lives for what our unconscious agreements are. Now, I have to tell you that for me and for stories that I have read, accounts that I have read, and even from what Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes says, when we start to become conscious of our unconscious agreements, our lives are going to change. They absolutely are. There's no way that it cannot change. Um, because when you have shared beliefs with someone and you become now aware of it, those beliefs are not meant to empower us. The reason why they are unconscious is because they are disempowering to us. They don't serve us. So it's just like when Bluebeard's wife, opened the door and she saw all his murdered wives. You cannot go back now to pretending. You cannot go back to that false reality that you were living in. So relationships are going to come crashing down. Um, Friendships are going to end. Maybe you're going to cut ties with your religion, uh, your family of origin, you know, because once you become conscious of those agreements, it doesn't mean that the other person is going to become conscious of those agreements. And furthermore, even if they were conscious of those agreements, they may not want to change. And so our lives are going to come crashing down. And, so which might beg the question, well, why even do this work? Like, why do this work? It is painful work. It takes a lot of hard work. It is, it's terrifying. Your whole life is going to come crashing down. And when I talked about tarot cards and the tower, it's like that's what the tower is. The tower is this false reality that we have created, that we are living in. And now the light of consciousness comes in, and then that false reality cannot stand anymore. It comes crashing down. That is inevitable. So, why do this work? Well, we have a choice, whether that choice is a conscious choice or an unconscious choice. We have a choice to not do this work. And for me, to not do this work means that I remain stunted. I remain a shadow of myself. I remain a skeleton of myself. I remain cut off from parts of myself. I cannot be in alignment with who I am. So I'll go back to the say I have an unconscious agreement with, say, my family. I have to respect every elder in my family. That is my unconscious agreement. Now, just say I am with an elder family member and they say something that is really hurtful to me. It has violated my boundaries. It has, you know, it's a really hurtful thing. And I have this shared belief with them. So we both believe this, that, well, because they are an elder, they can say whatever they want, they can do whatever they want, and I'm not going to say anything. Well, so this is what happens. So just say we are living in the unconscious. We have this unconscious agreement, okay? So they say something, they do something that violates my boundaries. Okay, so my heart chakra, I am terribly hurt. Okay, so I go up to my belief system here. What does my belief system say? Well, if I have an unconscious agreement with them, I am sharing my belief system with them. I do not have sovereignty over my beliefs. My beliefs are in the domain of something that is external to myself. So my beliefs are all over the place. Okay, they're not where they should be, which is in my control, in my domain. So my beliefs are over here. I know that I'm hurt. I go to my gut, and my gut says, oh my God, this is just such an awful feeling. I don't know what to do. I feel like throwing up, blah, blah, blah. And my throat chakra now, where I talk, where I set my boundaries, that's all going to get confused now. I'm going to shut down. And if I haven't been paying attention to my intuition, well, my intuition is going to get weaker and weaker. Okay. But now, just say I become conscious of this agreement. I shine a light on it and I say, oh, aha, I have an unconscious agreement with, these people that say that because they are my elders, I have to listen to them. I have to respect them. Well, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. I am now making this unconscious belief conscious, and I am going to say, nope, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to rewire that beliefs. I'm going to pull my energy back. I am going to examine those beliefs, and I am going to put these beliefs in my own domain. My chakras are mine. My emotions are mine. My voice is mine. My boundaries are mine. My thoughts and beliefs are mine, et cetera, et cetera. My intuition is mine. My body is mine. If I am going to share any of those with anybody, it is going to be in a conscious way. So now I'm rewiring my beliefs. Okay, this is not love. This is not respect. This is not okay. So now when somebody says something to me, an elder in my family, and I get hurt, I listen to my gut. My beliefs are mine now. So I say, hey, this is not respect. This is not love. This is not okay. No, I'm not going to allow that. So now my throat chakra says, hey, you know what? That's not okay. Why did you say that? Well, if you're going to continue treating me like this, I am not going to have you're not going to be a part of my life anymore. This is going to cause a lot of, um, this is going to cause a lot of issues. It just is. It is what it is, And why should we do this work? Well, for me, it just comes down to a few basic things. When we do this work, we regain our dignity. We become empowered. We become self powered. We are not looking externally for our source of validation, for our source of safety, approval, love. We are not constantly attuning to the external world as we probably had to do when we were children to keep ourselves safe. We are not looking externally to say, oh my God, are you okay? I need you to be okay so I can be okay. Oh my God, do you need me? Do you love me? Am I okay? Am I this enough? Am I that enough? Am I a good daughter-in-law? Am I a good wife? Am I doing this right? We're not constantly attuning to everybody else for our self-worth, for our validation, for our love, our sense of everything in this world. We are pulling all of that energy into ourselves, not in a myopic, selfish, um, negative way. We are now saying, you know what? I am going to look at my wounds. Only I can heal my wounds. Only I can change my beliefs. Only I can give myself that sense of validation. Now I'm in alignment with myself. I am attuned to myself. This brings so much peace, dignity, empowerment, power, like true power, authentic power, which means I can be humble. I can be human. I don't have to mask myself. I don't have to show up in the world so that everybody else feels safe, so that I get my sense of safety from something external to myself. With that comes a tremendous amount of confidence, like true confidence, not a confidence where I am cosplaying. I'm cosplaying being empowered. I'm cosplaying being confident. I'm pretending, I'm masking. No, we can show up in the world as we are. And all that energy, because it takes so much energy. Oh my goodness, it takes so much energy to mask, to pretend, to show up in the world as something other than what we are, to constantly be looking outside of ourselves, to always be vigilant, to always be pretending to be empowered, to oh my God, am I okay? Oh my God, blah 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 blah. It now, you pull all of your power into yourself. You have peace, you have stability, true stability. You learn how to become like a mountain, unshakable, but you also learn how to become like water, you know, just flexible. You can move. You learn discernment. You learn, when should I be like a mountain? When should I be like water? You take your cues from inside of yourself. It is such a sense of peace. And now you have all this energy for things that really matter, for, say, you know, loving yourself, for your relationships, your friendships, authentic relationships, where you can show up as you are, where the other person can show up as they are, where you have conscious agreements. You have more energy for your creativity, for doing the things that you love. This this is honestly worth it. So anyways, you guys, I didn't have any notes. I hope I was making sense. If you guys have any questions, any kind of concerns or feedback or anything, I would so appreciate it. I hope that this has been interesting. I hope this has given you food for thought, and thank you so much for being here. I will see you in my next video. Bye.